All right, welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Bruen, and we are here with ring announcer extraordinaire. Once again, this man has done it all, not only on the New England scene, but all over the place now. Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Palladino. Rich, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Looking forward to taking a deep dive into your career and all of your accomplishments. So this will be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
So rewinding back a bit to the very beginning, growing up, what was it like growing up as a fan? When did you first discover pro wrestling?
1978 would have made me 8 or 9 years old and put on the TV. And I vividly remember Captain Lou Albano with a piece of a wooden chair choking somebody. And I thought I was watching a crime scene because my brain wasn't fully functioning then. And that was it. And I was hooked. And that was it. I mean, you know, we're New England guys. So it was WWF Championship Wrestling and All-Star Wrestling is pretty much all we had.
Yeah.
And Lou Albano was one of the first people I remember. Whenever Larry Zbyszko and Tony Gurria won the tag team titles from the Yukon Lumberjacks, which was sometime in 78, I remember that being like the first like real big exciting thing that I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. So yeah, just watching it on TV.
And was there any one moment that you decided, you know what, this is something I want to do? And not only that, did you always see yourself as, in the announcer role?
Yeah, I pretty much did. I wasn't blessed with a lot of athletic ability. And there's so much that, especially I know so much now more than I did then, but it just didn't look like something I wanted to do to my body. And I always thought the announcer, our dear departed friend Howard Finkel, was always like one of my favorites because there's always something special when you saw like something on USA from like Madison Square Garden. But I was always drawn to the ring announcer. I'm like, well, that's a pretty cool gig. You get a little bit of attention, and 9 out of 10 times you're not getting beat up. So that was always the goal. It was just a matter of how do I get there. So.
And how did you get there? How did you get your foot in the door for that very first time? And where did you get some of your training done?
So I got my foot in the door by attending the first independent show I ever went to. I was 22 years old. I didn't know what independent wrestling was. And there was the American Wrestling Federation had run a one-off in December of 91 at the Lowell Auditorium. And I went to that because it was like every independent name was on it. It was run by a gentleman by the name of Gordon Scazzari, who has long since passed away. Fast forward a month later, I went to a WWF, WWE, whatever, house show at the auditorium, and I saw that guy Scazzari. And he was one of like 6 different ring announcers on his show. So I kind of introduced myself and just said, hey, I always wanted to be a ring announcer. He said, oh, make me an audio tape. And my dad, God rest his soul, was in a band. And I was like his roadie sometimes. And I said, Dad, the next time we're breaking down the equipment, I'm going to bring a tape recorder. And I literally like used his little microphone and made an audio cassette for this guy, Gordon Scazzari. He's like, that's it. You're hired. Now, he never ran another show, but that show in Lowell, I did commentary at a studio, I want to say in Lewiston, Maine, with the Boston bad boy, Tony Rumble. He's also no longer with us, obviously, but that was my mentor. Fast forward maybe a year and a half later, he started running shows, called me, and I made my debut October 23rd, 1993, Wakefield High School for Tony Rumble in the Century Wrestling Alliance. That's how I got in.
Let's talk about the CWA. You know, that was such a prominent promotion in the area, highly respected, so much great talent there, not only from New England scene, but people kind of being brought in from the tri-state area and all over, really. What are your memories, your early memories of the Boston Bad Boy, kind of meeting him for the first time?
I was in awe because I watched, like you, I watched whatever wrestling was on my TV. Yeah. And I didn't get, my mom, God rest her soul, we didn't get cable till 1982. and my life changed in 1982. But I used to watch Tony on ICW, which later became IWCCW for that merger with World Class for those couple of shows and whatever. So I watched Tony on TV as enhancement talent, as a character, as a commentator, as a manager. So I was in awe when I first met him. It was Gordon and I literally picking Tony up at his house, driving to Maine to do the commentary for Gordon's tapes at the TV studio. And I might as well have met Hulk Hogan. I was like, I watched this guy on my TV for years. So yeah, it was cool. I'd never done commentary. I wanted to be a ring announcer, but Tony and I got along really well. And like I said, he started running shows. Yeah, about a year and a half later. I think we met in April of 92 and he started running shows in October of 93. And yeah, he was such a great mind for the business. If he was still with us, I always wonder what the landscape of New England wrestling would look like. There wouldn't be as many promotions as there are now.
Sure.
I'll tell you that. But he was just smart, always connected. He had so many connections in the industry, like you said, with people from Tri-State and everything. So my first show had the Iron Sheik, Vic Steamboat, Ricky's little brother, who I think lived in Dracut, Massachusetts at the time. Tony Atlas, Tommy Dreamer, babyface Tommy Dreamer, Taz as the Tasmaniac, Surfer Ray Odyssey. There's a lot, Flex Lavender, all these guys that I saw on ICW.
Yeah.
And right there in Wakefield High School in front of 1,500 people. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
What a way to start, you know?
Yeah, I learned fast that all crowds aren't 1,500 people, but.
Right. Hey, just to get that opportunity, though, it's fantastic, you know?
Yeah.
Now, how often did CWA run as far as when you were there? And how many shows would you say, if you had to guess, that you did for them during your duration there?
Yeah, so at first it was like one show maybe every month or two. It wasn't like a full-time thing. But then as years went on, it was more like sold shows. And Tony's cousin owned Wallingford Ford down in Wallingford, Connecticut, and we would do shows in the parking lot there. He was from Revere, Mass, so we used to do shows like at Harry Delarusso Stadium. I'd say from Century Wrestling Alliance, which Tony ended up becoming part of NWA New England, I had to have done from 93 till he passed in 99, over 100 shows anyways. Not to mention we used to do triple shots during school vacation week at the old Good Time Emporium in Somerville, which isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
But that's where like Tony was smart. We'll do 3 shows. We'll do one at 11 in the morning, one at 4 in the afternoon, one at 7:30 at night. Parents want to get their kids out of the house during vacation. You got kids. I had small kids. I so I mean, we did a lot of shows. I that's a really good question. I'd love to go count it. Sydney Bacabella wants to know how many matches I think I've announced in my entire life. And I mean, I don't have enough time in the day, but I do have index cards going all the way back to 1996.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm an idiot like that, but it's my wrestling brain. But yeah, man.
Now, for those that don't know, they're not familiar with Tony Rumble. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Tony? What was he like a man? What was he like behind the scenes?
He was one of the boys, but he was he didn't demand respect, but he commanded respect. It's just everybody. I never saw him like have verbal altercations with anybody. He ran his shows. He was a great booker. And like I said a couple of times already, it's such a great mind for the business. He was just a guy that worked his way into the business, had enough connections, but because of how smart he was, he got very much involved in the production side. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say the success of CWA and NWA New England wouldn't have happened without Pat Doyle, who worked at, who is still affiliated with, is in Melrose, Massachusetts with their like local TV station.
Sure.
And, through that, it was like, we had great lighting, cameras, editing and everything, and had like a half-hour show that would air, throughout the area. So Tony was all about like TV. It's like cute to put on a show, but you got to you got to bring the people into the building. He paired up with Jeff Katz, who you and I know when he was out here, was on WRKO radio, more contacts. So Tony was just all about, all right, how can I create as much awareness of this industry? And he gave so many people opportunities that I don't think myself or anybody else would have had if it wasn't for his vision.
Sure.
So yeah, he was just very, very giving, but very much his way or the highway. Yeah. And if you wanted to play, if you wanted to get the exposure, and sure enough, there were plenty of guys that were doing dark matches or enhancement talent for like WCW back in the day, all through Tony. I mean, I don't know if I'm rambling too much, but I mean, people get blown away when I tell them at various points, our bookers were Kevin Sullivan and at another time, Jim Cornette. And this was when Jim Cornette was with WWF and living in Connecticut, the hellhole Connecticut, as he would say. And Kevin Sullivan and Tony were friends since Tony first started. And through that, with Kevin being like one of the bookers at WCW, a lot of our guys were getting opportunities to be on WCW TV. So, it was just a blessing to break in that way, because I know a lot of people didn't have it. I don't want to say as easy, but to have that much accessibility to bigger and better just by some of the people that were in your locker room. It's ridiculous.
Now, a lot of my friends, they didn't know who Tony was. They weren't into it like I was. They were mainstream WWF only type of crowd. And I remember seeing him show up in WCW World War III. He was one of the 60 participants.
Yes.
And I popped big for that. And everybody's like, who's that? And I'm like, it's Tony Rumble,
Yeah.
And I was a big magazine guy as well. So, I knew all the backstory of everything. But it was great to see him kind of appear, in little situations like that, whether it be the World War III, or he was the Undertaker's druid, at WrestleMania, or you always see him involved in some form or fashion. So
yeah, he had so many contacts, and I remember going backstage at a WCW house show in Hartford, Connecticut. Tony, myself, Pat Doyle, the great Bull Montana, and just having opportunities like that. And just being treated like one of the boys with my little VIP pass in the back, and going to the hotel and partying with like Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, all because of Tony Rumble, or when Nitro would come to Boston, they'd have a party at, I think, Fire and Ice, and it was like invitation only. And I'm like sitting there talking to like all these Diamond Dallas Page, Chris Jericho, and it's just all because I was Tony's guy. I was Tony's announcer. So, very, very fortunate to have broken in that way.
And how should Tony be remembered, do you think, in regards to his contributions?
Very giving, very smart, as I've said multiple times, a very successful promoter. He did he did things right. Like I said, my first show had 1,500 people in the audience, I mean, we would do smaller shows with a couple hundred at good times, but, it was all about giving everybody opportunities. I think, looking back on it, he's been gone for November will be 26 years since Tony passed. And so many people just, he just saw something in people and gave them opportunities. His Brotherhood faction, that was all Tony, and he took the guys he liked, the guys he knew, like Knuckles Nelson, Eric Sprazier, and Trey, and all those guys, and just made it, one of the hottest factions in the area in the 90s. Just a smart man. You were very fortunate if you knew Tony, and if Tony liked you.
Right. So. And obviously you did a lot of ring announcing for ECW, of course, locally in the New England area. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us about that? How did you get your foot in the door there as well?
The biggest thing was, again, it goes back to Tony, because I knew my first ECW show was in 1996, November 96. It was actually the same weekend that Tony was doing World War III. So he didn't even know until he got back from, I think it was in Norfolk, Virginia. He didn't even know until he got back that I had just done ECW, but he knew Paul Heyman from ICW, and the aforementioned Tommy Dreamer and Taz They vouched for me. Paul Richard vouched for me. The Eliminators knew me. So what happened was I went to Wonderland Greyhound Park in Revere, and it was November 96. And I'd gone they did a show in Webster the night before, and I went as a guest and sat in the crowd. And then the next night I was going again as a guest, and Paul Richard stopped me at the top of the escalator and asked me if I had my tuxedo, which of course I had it in my car. And he's like, all right, I want you to ring announce tonight. And I literally sat with Joel Gertner, who's another dear friend to this day, who I know you bring in for your conventions and whatnot. And he's another wealth of knowledge and an amazing human being. And he was starting his little heel thing with the Dudleys at the time, but he had done a lot of ring announcing there. He coached me through everything, and got to do that for about 2.5 years, which was one of the most amazing experiences. So I figured we'd be talking about it. That's why I'm
Oh
repping
yeah,
right there.
represent.
But yeah, I mean, that was like another, like meeting Tony. I was starstruck because I had watched him on TV, but I was a huge fan of the ECW product.
Yeah.
And to actually be in there with all these guys and legends and just craziness, it was pretty surreal. And I think really kind of helped elevate me and
Right.
my position. Because if I was good enough to do ECW, why wouldn't I be good enough to do a lot of the indies and whatnot? So, they threw me on TV a couple times, and, it's just an amazing experience and one of the things that I'm most proud of.
And you mentioned Greyhound Park, of course. What were some of the other venues? Do you remember some of the other
Oh, yeah.
ECW spots?
Yep. There was Wonderland, which is no longer there in Revere. There was the IBEW Hall in Waltham, which I think has been since converted to some kind of church or something. They don't host wrestling anymore, but that was an amazing building. I think it seated maybe like 800, but it was just like you were right on top of the action no matter where you sat. It was a great venue. I did one of their shows at the Webster Town Hall in Webster, Mass. Then there was I still call it the Bank Street Armory, the Memorial Auditorium, whatever it is, in Fall River.
Yep.
And and the Palladium in Worcester, which was absolutely surreal, because the first time we did the Palladium, the ring was on the floor and it was completely sold out. And then the next time we did the Palladium, they put the ring on the stage so they could get more tickets sold.
Yeah.
So, and I've done a handful of shows at the Palladium over the years, nothing like ECW in 97, 98, 99. Just complete craziness. Never knew what was going to happen, literally. So.
And what would you say, if anything in particular comes to mind, what would you say was your takeaway, your greatest takeaway from the CWA, and then the greatest takeaway from ECW?
I mean, my biggest takeaway was I don't think I would have been in ECW if I hadn't been in CWA first. A lot of this business is, oh, you still there?
Yep, still here.
Okay, I lost your video there. A lot of this business is not necessarily what you know, but who you know.
Sure.
And I don't think I would have had an opportunity to ring announce in ECW had I not had the contacts via Tony Rumble, like a Tommy Dreamer, who I'm still friends with to this day, like a Taz, like the Eliminators. I mean, I watch wrestling every day to this day, and like when I see Paul Heyman on TV, I'm like, that's the guy that was like, after my first show, was like, what's your name? I want you on every time I come to New England. You're my guy. And I got to do that till 1999, which was just surreal. But, my biggest takeaway was I was very fortunate to be in the CWA locker room, and I learned a lot from Tony. Even like little things where if he had me like even write up the lineup sheet to put on the wall, I'm Tony's guy. And then to be able to go into ECW and, just do what I do on a bigger stage, just absolutely ECW is one of the greatest experiences of my life. Yeah. Nerve-wracking, but because it's so high profile and you don't want to screw up, know. But I was just very, very fortunate to have been a part of that. And I like to say the original ECW,
Absolutely.
albeit for a couple, 2.5 years and whatever. I just wish I'd done more with it, because Paul Heyman did tell me, I can't guarantee I'll use you in all the other cities, but if you ever want to come, to a Buffalo or Pittsburgh or come hang out at the arena, I wish I had. I wish I had taken advantage of that, but I was young and traveling wasn't really my thing. And but I mean, I think I did 40 shows over those 2.5 years, because they would do 2 and 3 show loops.
Sure.
Like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, depending on the thing. Or it was at least 2 shows every time they came up. So, and I went as far down as Connecticut for them. So just amazing, amazing times that I look back on fondly.
So fast forwarding, Chaotic Wrestling is born,
Mm-hmm.
and you have been there since the very beginning, and such a huge part of it, and you're still there to
Mm-hmm.
this day. When it comes to Chaotic Wrestling, let's talk about the early days a little bit. It wasn't maybe as big of a crew, it was a kind of a tight knit crew at first there, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody was signed to contracts. And at that time, that was kind of unheard of, especially here in New England,
Yeah.
anywhere for the independents. So, what was your take on that whole time period and that experience with the contracts?
I didn't know what to make of it, and I was very nervous signing anything. And I don't want to, not every single performer in Chaotic had a contract, but there were a good 8 or 10 of us. I think we're called maybe the Dirty Dozen. I think we might have been referred to at one point. Um, I didn't know how I felt about it, because I was working for about 7 different promotions at the time, and the contract said that I would be only working for Chaotic.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have been around long enough, independent wrestling, there's not a ton of money to be made. So my biggest problem was severing ties with the guys that I had been working for, throughout the area, just to make a flat fee to work for one company and one company only. Everybody hated us. Um, Contracts in independent wrestling are unheard of, but I'll just throw out a number, and it was this, I'm not saying this was the number, but if you're a ring announcer making $25 a night and somebody says, I'm going to pay you $500 a month to work for me and nobody else. Well, if you do 3 shows over that month, you're making whatever that is, $167 per shot or something. But if you do 2 shows, you make it $250 a whack. If you may do 1 show, you make it $500. Nobody's going to turn down that kind of money.
Yeah.
But Chaotic's thing was, and part of the reason why we were so hated when we started, was one of the original owners, Randy Miller. We got featured on Nesson. They did a special on pro wrestling in New England. And Randy said, the problem with New England wrestling is same clowns, different circus. Meaning you could see Gino Martino and Ali Muhammad as babyface tag team in this town, and the next night they could be violent heels in this town. That ticked off a lot of people, saying that's what it was. The vision was that Chaotic Wrestling would sign who they thought were the best performers in the area. So if you wanted to see Gino Martino, Kyle Storm, Arch Kincaid, whoever, you had to go see Chaotic Wrestling. You weren't going to see them at NWA New England or New England Championship Wrestling. I'm just generalizing. So that was the whole vision. And I want to say it was about 8 months. And then I remember doing a soul show in Upton, Massachusetts, and being pulled aside like, hey, we're not gonna keep doing the contracts. We're gonna pay you this per night, whatever. But yeah, you guys can go do other indies now, because it was a good shot in the arm, because it made you feel valuable to a certain company. It was cool. We had TV, which was a big thing, and Chaotic opened in 2000. So that was always, really cool to have like TV exposure. And we did some high profile stuff, and they would bring in like a Bret Hart and, big names, and do some really cool things. But they realized they didn't have to, hold us all hostage,
Yeah.
and not work for anybody else. And just about everywhere that I worked for before welcomed me back with open arms. And I'm like, hey, I don't have this contract anymore. I can still do shows if you need me.
Right.
And same for a lot of the workers too, the guys and the girls that had contracts, the one night stand, Master Sandy, it's just a pretty eclectic group. But I don't mean to keep rambling, but you and I were kind of chit chatting, last week about doing this. I found that the chaotic roster was pretty much an extension of IIW, which was Anthony Rufo's promotion,
Yeah.
because it did start with Anthony and Gino and Kyle Storm, and Ronnie and Andy, the one night stand, and it just it started from that, and then it became so much more. And then it was like some of the Kowalski guys were coming in, and it took on a mind of its own. But yeah, I'm pretty fortunate to have been there. I did skip the very first show though, because I had never heard of it. The very, very first show was September 17th of 2000. It was on a Sunday, and it was in Worcester at Green Hill Park. And it was part of the WAAF radio station Loco Bazooka. Gino Martino calls me. He goes, hey, you want to work in front of 10,000 people? Chaotic Wrestling's doing this thing at the AAF thing. I'm like, I never heard of Chaotic Wrestling. And I got Pat's. I was literally going to the Pat's game that day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, I'm all set. No, I don't know anything about this. And 10,000 people aren't coming to see Chaotic Wrestling. 10,000 people are coming to see Disturbed play on the stage. And there'll be a ring there, which is nice. But, they had a hell of a crowd. But I actually, October of 2000 was the very first show that I did, in Wilmington, Massachusetts. But yeah, so that's when I kind of came up with the idea. I'm like, hey, man, we've been around for a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
They do something big. And man, did they do something big. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. But,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, and still going strong. I've already got my calendar for 2026 for
Wow.
Chaotic Wrestling. So we ain't going anywhere anytime soon. So Chase is doing good stuff there right now. But Chaotic was that was like my first real wrestling family. And a lot of them are still some of my closest friends in life from when I started Chaotic back then.
So I used to go with the ring crew often, Mr. Biggs or whoever it may be at that time. I would travel with them to the show. So I was at a lot of the Chaotic shows early on, just after 2000. And you could tell it had a different feel. It was definitely, a great roster, and it just felt different, and that was which was nice. It was refreshing. And that was just from my point of view, but I'm sure that was the case with the fans that attended as well. And, being a part of it was great. And funny quick story. So you couldn't make it, which was rare, to a Chaotic show. This was probably 2000 or 2001. So you had recommended me to replace you for the one night as ring announcer. And I was so excited to be a part of it. And, and I was mortified because I was still young at the time. I was probably, I don't know, 16, 17. Went with my mom. She drove to the show, and we couldn't find it. It was the days of MapQuest,
God,
no GPS or anything. And it was either in Methuen or where. I can't remember what part of Massachusetts.
It was probably the Methuen Knights of Columbus, because if I remember correctly, it wasn't right on the main road. I want to say it was off Route 28, but it was set back a ways. The
Right.
Graythorn Hall, I believe it was called. There was a building in front of it, a Dunkin' Donuts over here, and then the building was set behind. I bet you it was probably Methuen.
And
I could be wrong.
I was mortified because I was late to the show.
Yeah.
And I'm the ring announcer. I can't be late to the show.
Right.
And anybody that knew me, I was ring announcing all over at that point, and I would get to the show hours early every time.
Yeah.
And so I show up, it's already, I don't know, second or third match in.
Oh, wow.
And, oh yeah, it was, I was devastated.
Of course.
So, showing up like that, that's one of my big memories of Chaotic Wrestling. And Randy Miller he was just like, all right, Joe, all right, get out there. So,
Yeah.
He still gave me the shot, and I had a lot of fun with it, but boy, was I nervous at first, being late to a show that wasn't like me. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember why I wasn't even there, because I have to have like, it's got to be like an act of God or
Right.
something like deeply family rooted for me to like miss a show, or I have to be on vacation. And I usually, to this day, will plan a vacation like around my wrestling schedule, which is pretty, I don't know, 20 years from now, I'll be like, what the hell was I doing? But I
Yeah.
just love this stuff so much. So, um, yeah, I'm sorry that that happened, but, yeah, it's, you know, it was still, it was business guys running a wrestling company, which is
Right.
what I think made it so different.
Right.
Randy Miller, Jamie J. Mikowski, Ben Lentini, Don Singleton, aka Milo Masterson, they were business guys that said, "Well, let's do this wrestling thing,"
Yeah.
you know?
And
And
you touched on a few things that were kind of coming up in my questions. So, IIW, let's talk about that. International Independent Wrestling. Anthony Rufo, prior to that, was running UCW. Tommy D was running Power League Wrestling, and they kind of put their minds together. It was Tommy, it was Anthony, a couple other people. I think maybe Mr. Biggs, who was running IWA at the time. So they all kind of had a hand in it. And IIW, again, like you said, kind of a similar feel.
mhm.
It definitely had a different feel to it, and it was great. What's your best memories of IIW?
Very giving to the roster. It was one of the first places where I had a feeling that I was like belonged as a part of something.
Yeah,
Um, I have right over my shoulder is my Chaotic Wrestling Hall of Fame, your Hall of Fame, the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, NWA New England, and then right there is like it's a plaque that they would have like a dinner like once a year, and I was given this plaque, in appreciation for your contributions to IIW. I never had anything like that. Like, not disrespecting Tony Rumble or anything. You went,
sure.
you did your role on the show, and maybe you'd go out for a beer after or something like that, or we'd go on a road trip or something. But that was like the first time I was ever like given like something just for being a part of something.
Yeah.
Um, I miss Anthony Rufo dearly. I remember watching him when I moved to where I live in southeastern Massachusetts, I guess we'll call it. I saw Anthony Rufo as Marvin the Maniac on local public access, whatever.
Yeah.
And we became really, really good friends, brothers over the years. Um, it was as a Tony Rumble guy. There was like Tony Rumble, and then there was like the Rhode Island Indies. So I almost feel like they were like different ends of the spectrum. And it was I've always one of my closest friends to this day is Jose Perez,
Yep.
you know, and I here I was working regularly with Jose and Anthony and Gino and Ronnie and Kyle Storm and all these guys, and I remember doing a show. I think it was an IIW show, and it happened to fall on my birthday, and I remember doing that show, and like they had a cake for me and a card, and everybody had signed it for me and everything. It was just a very, very family, just a bunch of good brothers and sisters, like all putting on, fun shows. And, um, you know, it was a really fun place to work. I really enjoyed my time there. I didn't do, I wish I could remember how many I did. I'm telling you, the brain is the first thing to go at my age. But, I really, really enjoyed my time there. And, like I said, still friends with, you know, all those guys, Jose and Kyle and everybody. And, it's just, just a great place to be. It was fun. It was
Any
fun.
personal stories or personal memories of Anthony Rufo over the years?
Just for somebody that at the time was 400 pounds and had worked at other companies where they billed him as Abdullah the Butcher Jr., he was the kindest, nicest, gentlest human being that you could ever meet. He was just it's sad that I've had to say that's no longer with us so many
Yeah.
times during this, but he was. I just remember if you wanted him to wrestle, he could wrestle. If you wanted to be a character, he could be a character, and if you wanted him to bleed and hit people with chairs and get hit with chairs and chains and barbed wire. He could do it all. And at the end of the day, was a great businessman, always great to work for, always very accommodating, and, just a good brother that I miss dearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a kid, attending Independence for the first time, it was the NEWA. So for me, that was the only independent organization that I knew existed. I didn't really know anything about indies, and they started running in festivals around Providence, Federal Hill area. So that was my first experience attending any type of wrestling that was non WWF. And Anthony Rufo was there. He was wrestling as Dan Bula, which
Yes.
was kind of a Papa Shango takeoff a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
So, I was always like, wow, this guy is, insane. And then, I went to a couple more shows and he was Marvin the Maniac, like you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
And always these larger than life characters. And then, fast forward all these years later, and now I'm, ring announcing for him, or he's working at my shows, and he's just a sweetheart of a guy. And it's just so funny, you kind of paint this picture as a kid, as a fan, and he on the other side of things, he was just a great guy.
Never judge the book by the cover, right?
Exactly.
But yeah,
So
good times.
ONS, let's talk about One Night Stand, Ronnie Delicious and Edward G. Ecstasy. What are your memories of them? Big part of the scene, like you said, IIW, and of course, Chaotic Wrestling.
Yeah, they were like the hottest act in like 2000, 2001. They were contracted, obviously, with Chaotic. They were unique. Ronnie, I looked at Ronnie like I did like a Tony Rumble, because I saw him as Star Warrior on ICW and saw him as enhancement talent on, WWF TV and all that. And then paired up with Andy, who I had never met until I started working with him for IIW and Chaotic. They were just, any tag team that comes out to I Touch Myself by the Divinals has to be something special. And they had the leopard print or the zebra print, trunks, and just very, very unique, very, you couldn't help but be captivated by whatever they were doing in the ring.
Yeah.
Ronnie was the veteran. Edward G. Ecstasy, aka Andy, aka Edward G. Ecstasy, was newer to the scene, hadn't been around, but the two of them just meshed together so well. And now it's funny though, because I see Ronnie once a year at the Killer Kowalski, the old IWF, which was Kowalski's group that I never worked for, but I knew everybody. They have like a get together. They have a couple of get-togethers during the year, but they have one big dinner, and they started inviting me to it. And I saw Ronnie for the first time in years. You would have thought we had just done a show the night before.
Yeah.
And then I see Andy all the time, because it's no secret now, his daughter is one of the best talents in this area right now. Livia is Edward G. Ecstasy's daughter. And that's when I always joke and say, I've been around too long. When the guys I was announcing in the early 2000s, now I'm announcing their kids.
Right.
And now they were just, I dare say 2001, like they were the hottest act in New England wrestling, without a doubt.
Funny side story with Ronnie Delicious. So my first job, it's 1998. I'm working at a supermarket. I'm 16. Ronnie used to shop there. It was Rojax in Seekonk, Massachusetts. And I mean, he's a big guy, he's kind of a larger than life frame. And he walks in. Every time he'd come in, I just kind of looked at him from afar and I'm like, man, that guy, he looks like a wrestler. Like he should be a wrestler.
Yeah.
And fast forward, not much longer after that, maybe 2 years later, first time I ever saw him in the wrestling business personally, Johnson of Wales, you're the ring announcer. It's IIW. I'm on commentary. And there was a 20-man over the top rope battle royal. I hadn't been in the locker room all day because I've been getting ready for commentary and doing my thing with interviews and stuff. And so the participants start coming out. I see Ronnie D walking out, and I was just blown away. I'm like, wait, that's
the guy I saw Rojax.
Yeah, all these years I've been saying he should be a wrestler. And that was my first experience seeing Ronnie D, and pretty cool, but really nice guy. Really nice.
I mean, you watch some of those old WWF All-Star Wrestling, Championship Wrestling tapes, Ronnie D. from Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
He had a lot of TV time, as enhancement, whatever. But how many people wouldn't kill to have an opportunity like that?
Absolutely.
Just a really good guy. And just when he was doing the whole one night stand, he go, "How you's doing?" It's just like, swear to God, it's like the first thing I said to him when I saw him after all those years, like, "How you's doing?" And texting like Jamie, I'm like, "Oh my God, look who's at this dinner I'm at right now. It's friggin' Ronnie." Yeah, just a really, really good guy.
So over the years, you've worked in so many places, so many buildings by this point. What are some of your favorite venues you've ever been to?
Wow. The Palladium when it's full. I had mentioned the IBEW Hall in Waltham. But early chaotic, there was a building, small building, that was just kind of magical. It was called the PAV, the Polish American Veterans Club. There was just something about that building. Maybe it was the fact that there was like a little sliding wall that separated the hall from the old Conjure Bar, where you could still smoke cigarettes and cigars. So it's like that smell of like stale beer and cigarettes with a cigarette machine in the lobby. There's just something about it. It's just like so old school wrestling. And I always loved that place. Now more current, like the White Eagle for Wrestling Open is one of my favorite places, and Wrestling Open Rhode Island down your way, the roads on the Pawtuxet in Cranston is just, I walked in there the first time and I said, this is too nice for pro wrestling.
Yeah.
It is just a pristine, gorgeous building.
Right.
Those are some of the ones that locally that kind of stick out in my mind. But like throughout the country, like two dreams came true in like 23 and 24, where I actually got to announce in what everybody calls the ECW arena in Philly. And with my work in MLW, I got to go work in like 3 times at Center Stage Theater in Atlanta. So those are some of my favorites. There's probably plenty that I'm leaving off the list, but those are the ones that stick out first and foremost in my head. Yeah.
So February of 2002, the World Wrestling Federation is having a show, Monday Night Raw, at the Providence Civic Center.
Ooh.
And I am there with my buddy Jay. We got tickets to the show, going to go check it out. Got there a little early, going out for lunch, kind of went to the arena for a little while. And I'm standing there and I see this group building up and I'm like, wait a minute. I know these guys, and I see one or two. I'm like, okay, whatever. They must be going to the show too. All of a sudden it's, 15 guys and they're all standing there and it's the chaotic locker room. So they're all standing there and I'm like, what is going on here? So I'm about to go over. Before I do, Randy Miller comes over. He's like, Joe, we got something going on. And he doesn't tell me what it is. He's like, we're short a guy. He's like, can you want to come with us? And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, it's just a skit. And I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what was going on. I said, you know what? Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
So I apologized to my friend Jay. I was like, Jay, I got to go check this out. I got to see what's going on.
An opportunity, man.
Yeah. So Jay's like, hey, do your thing. And, he slaps a backstage pass on my chest and we start walking back there. Anthony Rufo and I are going back there and we get to the door and DDP holds the door for everybody. So gracious and just so nice. And first guy we bumped into was Dustin Rhodes, and he was very polite, kind of introduced himself to the group.
Mm-hmm.
And, at this point, I'm kind of blown away. I have no idea what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And as we're walking, none of us really do. And Anthony's like, yeah, this is supposed to be some type of skit. I'm not too sure what it is. I'm like, okay. And I start getting nervous because I hear a little chitter chatter of, taking bumps and it could get kind of crazy. And I was like, okay, I do announcing, but I'm not a wrestler. I don't take bumps. So I'm like, what am I signing up for here?
Right.
And other than yourself, it was pretty much a room of wrestlers,
Yeah.
So, but then that was the key though. I was like, well, Rich is here. He's not a wrestler. So maybe I'll be okay. So we walk back there. They're like, help yourself to the buffet. And we're back there. And then we go over to Richard Posner for magic and props. And they're kind of like, picking out, costumes for some of the guys. Or I think they were like, out of the 19 or 20 guys, 5 of them are going to wear a piece from the prop department.
Mm-hmm.
And, they kind of picked the 5. And then Chad, who went on to become one of the dicks with the WWE, he ended up coming up with kind of a funny idea to do something different. So he wasn't going to wear the outfit. So Randy Miller comes up to me. He's like, Joe, you were the last one to sign on. He's like, so how about doing a favor? Okay. Like, whatever. I'm here to do it, So,
Sure.
and it was a ball. I just have, great memory from that whole experience. It ended up being filmed later on that day at Tim White's Friendly Tap.
Yeah.
And Bruce Pritchard was in charge of the skit. And just kind of, everything about it. It was just seeing the ins and outs, for the first time, and how things work on a large scale.
Yeah, the cool thing was we start backstage at the Providence Civic Center.
Yeah.
And then we're whisked off to Smithfield, where Timmy White's bar was, or what town is that in?
Or Lincoln, maybe. Yeah, somewhere in there.
And then we film everything there, and then we go back to the arena and watch it during the live broadcast while we have our backstage passes, eating catering and all that stuff.
Right.
I remember that vividly. And because that was another thing with Chaotic was, they had good working relationship with WWE. Yeah. And I think because it was like the businessmen that were running it, and there's so many different levels. We could do a whole interview just about everything Chaotic, but I mean, we had connections with WWF at the time, and our guys were doing enhancement talent. But I remember getting the call, hey, you want to be on Monday Night Raw? They need like 20 extras. And so, we were part of that whole Billy and Chuck and the APA. But I was hearing the same crap that you were hearing that day, that there could be bumps and all this stuff too. So as a not trained wrestler, was very nervous going into that skit.
Yeah.
And then obviously as it played out, it's background, but I didn't care. It was a hell of a payday and a hell of an experience, and something I'll never, ever forget.
Absolutely.
That was something. So do you remember the date? Because people could watch that on Monday Night Raw and try and spot us.
I don't remember the exact date, but I know it was February of 2002.
Yeah.
Providence Civic Center. And I remember Dave Hebner paid us. He was the one that paid us after the fact. I also remember part of the skit was filmed ahead of time and part of it was live, and they meshed them together to make it look like one piece.
Yeah.
And then the tape got a police escort back to the arena from the bar.
Of course.
I do remember that. And I remember riding to that show, to the bar with Anthony, Vince Vicalo, and I believe John Walters. I think we were kind of traveling in Anthony's vehicle there. And just lots of good memories from that whole skit. And definitely cool to do it with, your fellow brothers, of wrestling. So
it was a lot
of fun.
Yeah. Awesome stuff.
Yeah. So favorite people to ring announce over the years, all the promotions you work for, is there anybody that just rolls off the tongue and you're like, man, I like this?
I always loved introducing Nick Gage because it was always such an elaborate intro.
Yeah.
And I love Nick Gage. I met him for the first time at Fett Music Hall and beyond. And I said, hi, I'm the ring announcer. How do you want me to introduce you? He said, I introduced myself. And I said, okay. Very intimidating. Very intimidating. And like the first 2 shows, he just grabbed the mic and introduced himself. And then there was one, he let me do it and he really liked it. And then it got to a point where every time I was working with Nick, he'd be in front of me like, come on, let me hear it. And I'm like, yes. And it's the whole represent the murder, death, kill gang, blah, blah, blah. That and she's in Ring of Honor now, but Rachel Ellering became a really, really good friend during the indies and stuff like that. And she would just so genuinely like tell me how she gets fired up when I would be introducing her. And there's a couple of shows that we did where I'm like introducing her and she's like rubbing my shoulders and going, and then stand in front of me like that. Those are 2 that stick out. I mean, I love saying every name, but I mean, it's hard to pick one. I mean, as a kid, I always loved Jimmy Superfly Snuka. So the first time I announced Superfly Snuka, I'm like, I can't believe this is actually happening.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it, all of them. I just try and make every intro just. I want it to sound like WrestleMania. I want it to be like that big match feel. I want it to be larger than life. So yeah, I've got to announce so many amazing names. It's hard to just pick one. Um, but even to this day, I still love saying the innovator of violence, Tommy Dreamer, because first time I met Tommy in '93, he was clean shaven, baby face, literally a baby face, no facial hair, shiny blue pants with black shiny suspenders. Like it was before he became like the ECW guy, um, and the ECW legend. Yeah, just so many. That's a good question. I should really put more thought into that. But yeah.
How about spots to eat? You're traveling. Any particular spots? You're going to a certain city, and you're like, oh man, I can't wait to go there because they have this place. Or
Not a lot of times, like locally, anytime we're anywhere near Boston, we end up at Kowloon. That always makes me happy because I grew up in the North Shore of Massachusetts.
right.
And Kowloon is where we used to go after the prom, after the cheerleader dance, whatever the semi-formal dances. We would always go to Kowloon. So now that it's become like the Ribera Steakhouse in Tokyo of wrestling in
Yeah.
New England, I always love going to Kowloon. Um, I don't really have a favorite food spot. It's always just a lot of times too when I'm taking like long trips, it's just a matter of whoever's driving and decides where we're going. But I wish I could remember. I want to say it was called Dinosaur Barbecue. It was somewhere in Syracuse. We did a Beyond show out there several years ago, and I was with Drew Cordero. And I remember it was a long, I want to say like 5 hour ride home. We got to go to Dinosaur Barbecue. And by God, it was some of the best barbecue I've ever had in my life. Those are a couple that stick out. But now for me, whenever I'm in Jersey or Philly, it's not even like a sit down meal. It's getting a fresh sandwich at Wawa
Yeah.
because we don't have that up here.
Sure.
We don't,
Absolutely.
Cumberland Farms or whatever else we've got out here. There's just something about a Wawa turkey sandwich that you're watching them make fresh is always just enjoyable for me. So,
What are your memories of another staple in the New England area for so long? Super bad Steve Bradley, the late great.
wow, what a nice kid. Steve, I just remember another white meat baby face coming up the ranks. He was doing a lot of spots for Tony Rumble. I remember meeting him and he and Alex Arion, I dare say, like at the same show for Tony Rumble. I want to say at Melrose High School, Melrose, Massachusetts. I don't know why that's sticking out in my brain. Um, I remember doing a show with Steve, and I won't say who, but somebody like literally potatoed him during the match.
Wow.
And I remember being outside getting into the ring for the next match. He goes, "Do you see that MFer literally punched me like right in the mouth?" I'd never seen a temper out of Steve like that. Um, and then he just, he wasn't around long before he was, off to developmental. The problem was he was in developmental so long, I feel like those in charge forgot that he was still in developmental because they had sent him to Puerto Rico, I want to say, for a while. I almost feel like they kind of forgot about him. Um, One of my biggest regrets is when Steve started running WFA. Yeah, it's public knowledge, but there was some heat between Steve Bradley and Chaotic Wrestling. And Steve started his own company, you know, as a shot, to not, well, to put Chaotic out of business. He
Sure.
wanted to have a different product than what we were offering, where we were kind of like rainbows and lollipops and kid wrestling. He was kind of like, yeah, well, we're going to have a thumbtack death match and a steel cage match and, female matches and all this other stuff. One of my biggest regrets, though, was when Steve started running WFA, and after the heat had kind of died down between he and Chaotic, Vince Vicalo, said, Steve would love for you to come up and start doing some spots for him. My schedule was kind of wonky at the time, and I knew that there was still a little dissension. I wish that I had, because it wasn't too long after that he had passed away.
Gotcha.
But no, Steve he was one of the good ones. I was happy to see him get the success that he had. I just wish that his WWE opportunity would have been more than just taking a chair shot from Stone Cold Steve Austin in the Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah.
Because he did dozens and dozens of dark matches and just never really got that big opportunity. But if you watch what he did in Power Pro Wrestling in Memphis, and what he was doing in OVW, he was just, he was, I just wish he had got that big break, but yeah,
What's your
just a
take
moment.
on the indies being so territorial back in the day? When we were new to the business, it was so territorial. I mean, it was so
Yeah.
it was so different than it is now. It seems like now everybody's working everywhere and everybody's having a lot of fun. Back
Yeah.
then, it was a little different.
Yeah. Tony Rumble was the first one to teach me about loyalty. I remember Tony having a show on the same night as ECW. And I was told that he broke me into the business and he didn't give a crap. I don't know if I can swear on this.
Yeah,
He
oh, yeah,
didn't care that I had ECW. I was Tony Rumble's ring announcer, and I ended up missing an ECW show because I had a commitment to Tony. Um, it was very territorial back in the day, and very few and far between these days do you hear, well, if you work here, you're not working there.
right.
It's almost non-existent to this day. But back then, I almost feel like everybody had like their own little territory, or there were certain bigger groups that had certain sold shows.
Yep.
And if you went to go work for the rival company, that may have been trying to get that high school or that boosters fundraiser or whatever,
Yeah.
it was drama central. But um, yeah, I remember vividly in those days, and it didn't help that Chaotic was putting pieces of paper and money in front of everybody and saying, "You work here and nobody else." And that's why I always joke and say, "Man, everybody hated us," and probably people may still hate us today. I don't care,
Yeah.
but you can't knock a company that's been in existence for a quarter of a century.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I don't think we're all independent contractors, like literally. So, I mean, I know to this day I work everywhere, you know, and there are sometimes where I do have to make a choice. I have one coming up, and I hate it, but it's tough. I do think that I don't want to say the same clowns, different circus, like Randy said in 2000, but I do think there should be more of everybody's in this obviously for their own gain,
Yeah.
but there are some that do work together with other companies. But if everybody just get on the same page, because I feel like the New England wrestling scene, and when I say New England, I mean from Maine down to Connecticut. I mean, I just feel like there are some times where you could have 3, 4, 5 different options for independent wrestling within a 2-hour radius of each other. And
Right.
I just think that's it's overkill, because you're taking money off, you know, these independent contractors' plates,
Sure.
because, promoter X wants you, say, in Bangor, Maine, and promoter Y wants you in Hartford, Connecticut, and they're running the same night or somewhere in between. I think it just gets a little oversaturated at times.
Yeah.
But I do see more of a working together, um, mentality. Not that all independent contractors. So, I'll use Anthony Green and Channing Thomas as two of my favorites today that I can see at Open, I can see at Limitless, I can see him at Live Pro, and multiple other promotions, Chaotic, wherever. Um, I think that's kind of worked itself out
Yeah.
over time, but it's still independent wrestling. Everybody's out there to make a buck. So, unfortunately.
And obviously, pro wrestling is nothing without the fans. What are some of your favorite fan interactions over the years? Anything that sticks out?
I had one very, very recently, actually. A fan that goes to Limitless in Maine. Um, I I had a little pug. Her name was Luna. All my dogs been named after wrestlers. And this fan like hand drew a picture of my Luna and presented it to me. Like at intermission, it was a big show we were doing for Limitless, and it kind of like choked me up. One of my favorite fan interactions is now somebody I work with that I can't speak highly enough of, and that's Chris Sanders and his dad, who wrestled, as you know, as Wolverine. He and Danger Boy Alfredo, the legends themselves. When I first met Chris, he was a kid, and it's over on the wall over there, but he like drew this picture of me. And like I literally have it framed on my wall over there. It's those kind of interactions. Or I've got some other stuff on the walls over here that fans have made me, like Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, with like a microphone. I had one fan, and the timing was perfect. I should go up, get up and go take it off the wall. Made an action figure of me,
Wow.
put it on a card and everything, and that holds a special place for me because it actually got delivered to me on the same day that I had lost my mom. I remember getting this box in the mail. I remember interacting. Another guy from Maine whose name escapes me right now, and he's like, "Hey, I'm sending you something. Can I have your address?" And that's always, I don't even like to say what my hometown is, sometimes,
Right.
but it showed up this, I'll never forget, March 25th, 2021. It was the same day my mom had passed away, and that box like showed up in the mail. And I was just like, I was already an emotional mess. And I'm like, oh my God, somebody made an action figure of me.
Wow.
Those are some of them, but there was a wonderful woman down in Connecticut that would bring me like cookies. And there was one show where the show before I had strained my voice, and the next show she brought me like a bag of cough drops. Her name's Kate. It just, the fans are, I mean, there is no independent wrestling if there's no fans. So I've had countless interactions, but those ones just pop into my brain. And, like I said, the picture of my dog that we had just put down was, that was like, that's just genuine. That's genuine appreciation for what I do. And now I have appreciation for what they do. I mean, it's a picture of my dog, and it just made me so sad, though. I started tearing up during intermission. They'd come over to the merch table and, "Hey, I got something for you." And I was like, oh my God. And it was like maybe a month after we had to put her down.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a lot of generous people out there.
Something you'll never forget.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining us for part one. And we're going to sign off here. Fans, don't forget to like, subscribe. Thank you for joining us today. We've had Rich Palladino, and we will be back for part two. So pay attention to notifications.